Paid actor portrayal.
I didn't see it coming. Life can be so unpredictable. After losing my dad, it made me think about my family if something were to happen to me. The mortgage, car payments, and all the other bills. Even things like our annual summer vacation would be out of reach. I had heard about life insurance through Ethos and how easy it was to get coverage. They were right. I knew it was time to stop putting it off and get life insurance right now. I got on my computer and went to ethoslife.com. In just 10 minutes, I was covered. And boom, family protected. Thanks to Ethos, my family won't have to worry about the bills if the unpredictable happens to me.
Ethos, fast and easy online term life insurance. Up to $2 million in coverage with no medical exam. Some policies as low as $1 a day. Answer a few health questions and get your free quote at ethoslife.com/audio. That's ethoslife.com/audio.
Celebrate the holidays at an Arizona state park. Whether it's a cool weather hike through the low desert, playing in the snow in the high country, or packing up the family in the RV and spending Christmas in the parks. Just don't forget the presents. Arizona state parks have something for everyone this holiday season. Find an Arizona state park near you by visiting azstateparks.com. And happy holidays from Arizona State Parks and Trails.
Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since we discovered Spotify for Podcasters, we feel like having options like video podcasts and Q&A lets us be more creative on another level. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Welcome on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And we have a lot to get into. Even though the minor leagues are on break for most of this week, we have a lot of news to talk about on tonight's episode. We're going to recap days 1 and 2 of the 2023 MLB Draft. And we're also going to discuss several promotions that have been announced in the Orioles farm system, including Coby, Mayo, and Chayce McDermott from AA Bowie to AAA Norfolk, and Jackson Holliday from High A Aberdeen up to AA Bowie. They'll be on tonight's show, but first we're going to start off by welcoming Bob back on the air after a couple of weeks off. And Bob, as he usually does, is going to introduce some new members to our Patreon community.
Yeah, it feels so good to be back. I missed it while I was gone. Good shows, though, so at least I had something to listen to. Yeah, we got some new patrons. We got Paul Jones, Jeremy Reynolds, Vitor de Souza Silva, and one more. We got Quinn Phelan here, who is our newest member, youngest member. And,
You were hiding that baby. You were hiding that baby the whole time we were talking before the show.
Yep. She's a very chill baby. She was just chilling out on my lap this whole time. Surprise you all. So that's why I was out. Happy reasons, but glad to be back for sure.
I feel like it was kind of our equivalent of the Lion King presenting from Pride Rock, and said it's Bob's office there.
Yep, absolutely. Now I can sit a little more comfortably with the microphone, and we can get to all this exciting stuff.
Yeah, I don't know that we're going to quite top that visually for the rest of the night, but we'll try our hardest. The Orioles started out the MLB Draft on Sunday night by taking Enrique Bradfield Jr. with the 17th overall pick, the outfielder out of Vanderbilt. Consensus grade 80 speed, according to most national scouting reports. Gets plaudits for his defense as well as his contact ability. They rounded out night one by drafting UNC outfielder Mac Horvath, who had 20 homers, 20 steals, and 20 doubles, plus across the board this season at UNC. And then in the beginning of a trend, the Orioles selected a right-handed pitcher, Jackson Ballmeister, out of Florida State. And the reason I said that was the beginning of a trend was that day two, which we're going to get into a little bit later on, was heavy on pitchers, especially right-handed pitchers. So, Nick, I'm going to start with you here. We'll start with Bradfield in particular, just before we get into the other two guys who were taken on night one. I know that was not a name that either one of us necessarily had on our radars when we were previewing the draft last week. The pick was a little bit of a surprise, especially because some of the players that we highlighted, including Arjun Nimala, were still on the board. Yet the Orioles went with Bradfield, and it feels like even though he does part from their preferences in terms of his power production, there are a lot of tools that could fit their model, and they seem to like.
Yeah, and apologies for my voice if I just go out. Bob's back, and it's my Jordan flu game here, but it's draft night, and I was not going to cancel on this one. But I'm glad we weren't live last night, though, although I kind of wish maybe we were so I'd have my voice. But the instant reaction I don't think would have been great because it was not disappointing, but just like shocking because I'm watching this draft, and the board is falling perfectly. I never imagined this board is going to fall exactly how I wanted it to. And then you mentioned, Arjun Namala was there, Colin Houck. I was warming up to Houck. Chayce Davis, Braden Taylor, Hurston Waldrop was sitting there. Everybody except Bryce Eldridge, really, that I wanted was sitting there. And they go Enrique Bradfield from Vanderbilt. Not the super home run oriented, power guy. I feel like we get a good vibe on how the Orioles are going to attack this draft. And then they're just like, you thought wrong. We're going to switch it up on you. But I think he just fell. I don't think I never really looked at him because I didn't think he would be there. Even if I did think he would be there, he probably wouldn't be in my top 5, 6, 7, 8 options, to be honest. But I think you just saw this tremendous value fall in your laps, and you had to take him. So you look at some of the metrics, though, out there and some of the underlying data. I think this is a guy who's got a pretty impressive hit tool that they can build with. And I think it was Baseball America said he has like 30 grade home run or 30 grade power in the major leagues. Again, I think some of the metrics and data, you put him in this system, I think the Orioles can get more out of him. And the only guy in the draft with 2 80 grade tools, speed and defense. So this is a tremendous value I think the Orioles were able to land.
Yeah, I was like getting so excited because as our pick was getting closer and closer, I'm like, okay, my guys are still there. Chayce Davis, Arjun Namala, Hurston Waldrop, let's go. We're going to get one of them for sure. And then this guy just was not even on my radar whatsoever. The only thing I really knew about him was he's fast, and apparently all he can do is he's a slap hitter. That's what I had heard coming into last night. So I was a little disappointed, not going to lie. But just basically like the whole first night, the more I digested stuff about it, slept on it, I just grew to like it more and more. I love that he's got the 80 grade speed, 70, 80 grade defense in center field. Sounds like he's got 80 grade character and leadership skills, so hard work. And if there's one thing that this player development team is proven they can do, it's develop hitters. So if that's like the only thing missing in his game, if you can get him to tap into that in-game power to like 15 home runs, 20 home runs, 270, 280 hitter, that's a star right there. And what really sold me on him was the lack of chasing pitches outside of the zone. Seems like he fits right in with the Colton Cowsers and Gunnar Hendersons and all the guys we have that work great at bats. So just perfect building block for the Orioles to work with, I feel like.
With Bradfield, I feel like the Orioles, if they can get him to about 15 home run per year power, that's a win because with his elite chase skills, as you mentioned, Bob, he doesn't chase a lot of pitches out of the zone. He's going to draw walks. He can hit the ball all over the place. He's going to add a lot of value with his defense. So you really don't need him, I think, at least, to develop into a 20 to 25 home run bat to justify this pick, if everything else clicks. He is a very high floor pick. I will say that. When I saw the selection with Bradfield, I thought, okay, they've got a big leaguer. And they've got a guy that's going to stick around the big leagues for a while because of that speed and defense, which is not always something you're guaranteed with at the 17 pick. There were definitely higher ceiling guys there, but Bradfield has a very high floor, and you could see where there's room left in that ceiling if they can develop the bat a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and the walk and strikeout numbers. He had a career walk rate of 14.6% and a career strikeout rate of just 13.6%. And that, as Michael Elias said, this is one of the leadoff hitter, one of the best hitters on the best programs, one of the best teams in the entire country, in the SEC, the best conference in the entire country. Like 130 career stolen bases. He was a perfect 46 for 46 last season. I think the only thing that I saw a lot of comments about the 279 average last year. But again, you're playing at Vanderbilt. You're facing studs every single weekend. And depending on where you look, he still has like a 50, 60 grade hit tool. So again, there's more that the Orioles could get out of. You mentioned the chase rates. We're going to pull from another great resource that we lost to a pro organization here in Mason McCray. he had some tweets from late May. So, I mean, the season was just about over by that point, but good sample size there. He had a 10% end zone whiff rate, 13% chase rate, and nearly half of his batted balls were 95 plus miles an hour. So if you're like, what do those mean? Is that good? It's tremendous. Swing decisions. He's got sound swing decisions. I think it's a pretty similar conversation to like Joey Ortiz too. If his bat can be just league average, like Ortiz is starting shortstop in the major leagues, like we've said. If Bradfield can just be a league average hitter, he's a top of the lineup talent. And as McCray pointed out, as part of his tweets, he said Bradfield's a 4 to 5 WAR player if the bat is just league average. Without the league average bat, he's still a 2 or 3 WAR player. That's how good the defense is. That's how disruptive the speed is. I don't like the he's Jorge Mateo in center field comparisons because I think Bradfield can hit the ball, Mateo cannot.
Can also take a slider down and away.
Yeah, like I don't like that at all. And Bob mentioned the head on his shoulders. I like reading some of these. I think Michael Bauman at Fangraphs had a great article. I know Baseball America had an article like, does his game fit in the major leagues? A lot of great reading out there in Bradfield. If you got some time to kill at work. He's meticulous in his film study. Right? I loved reading. I think it was the Fangraphs article that he talked about that, how meticulous he was in if the pitcher's head is at like this angle, he knows he's going to home plate, so he's going to take off. He knows pitchers inside and out. I love that. So, and as you tinker with his offensive game, that defense and speed's not going to be impacted. He's still going to be elite in those areas. So there's still a lot of ceiling there with him.
Yeah, I just wonder if they see something in his swing that they're like, oh, if he falls to us, we can easily fix this, and that will make him, a talent that's well above what you typically get in number 17. And this was a deep, pretty stacked draft at the top anyway, so pretty much no matter what, they were going to get a legit talent here. But yeah, he might steal 100 bases one year in the major leagues, the way they keep trying to give more benefit to the runners. And amazing defense, like you said. I mean, that's a major leaguer almost. Even if he never hits a lick, that's a major leaguer pretty soon, probably 2 or 3 years. So yeah, just gotta hope that they can develop him. And again, another thing I love about this draft and this guy in particular is how the Orioles are researching these guys personally, not just their skills on the field, but off the field. It just seems like they really value a positive clubhouse environment and think that leads to better player development overall, competitive against each other, with each other, but also, got their mindset on, getting better together. So just absolutely love the direction that continues to go with this organization. And Enrique Bradfield Jr., I might have been a skeptic when I first heard your name called, but I'm all in now.
I also just like a side story of how Colton Cowser doesn't answer Mike Elias's call, but Enrique Bradfield called Mike Elias apparently. Like, that was just fun night. I love draft night so much, and I love stories like that. This kid wants to be an Oriole. This kid wants to be a big leaguer. Welcome to Baltimore. That's all I got to say.
Move on now to the player that was chosen behind Bradfield in the Orioles draft board, and that was Matt Horvath. I talked about Horvath's numbers a little bit when I was introducing this segment, and just to dive a little bit deeper, this past season at North Carolina, he belted 24 home runs with 25 steals and 29 attempts to go with 21 doubles. He posted an OPS of 1129. Along with that power and speed combination, Horvath does bring some versatility to the table as he can play infield as well as outfield. Horvath has said, I saw an article, and I'll pull up the outlet in a moment just to give proper credit, that he does see himself as someone who could develop into a center fielder, but the arm plays well at the corner spots right now. The question that seems to be out there when you read national reports about Horvath is the swing and miss tools. So, Bob, I don't know about you, and maybe this isn't a direct comparison necessarily, but there's a little bit of Judd Fabian vibes I get to this, and maybe even John Rhodes, where the raw tools are there, and it's a question of can they harness some of his actions at the plate and get, come back to this point all the time. Swing decisions. Can they improve his swing decision?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the trend of this draft, as I'm sure we'll get to, is pitchers with electric stuff that they can work with and just absolute incredible athletes in the outfield that they can work with. And Horvath, the new social media threads, I've been trying to use that a little bit, and I'm doing a little blurb on each guys that the Orioles picked. And I said he reminded me of like a offensively a combination of Judd Fabian and John Rhodes. So I think you nailed it right there. Just you can just tell in his swing from the video that it's just powerful and athletic and natural. And I think the swing and miss might be a little overrated because from what I was reading, like his problem was that he wasn't swinging enough and he was taking strikes and getting himself in bad counts or taking strike three sometimes. So I actually think it was like 80% something was his contact rate or whatever it was exactly. It was like right, decent numbers, good numbers, nothing to be concerned about. But this is just a guy that, and I feel like now the biggest issue when you get these athletes in, they're just tool boxes or tool sheds, as Brad Seelig said earlier today. Can they stay healthy with the freak athletes that they are? And I feel like this guy is just made to be developed by the Orioles into a really good player. And I look forward to it. I love that he can play third base and the outfield, like another Billy Cook type who can, play the infield and the outfield. So yeah, absolutely love this pick. And John Rhodes plus Judd Fabian, I'll take that every day.
Yeah, he's got the plus arm. We saw some of the videos there of him throwing guys out from right field. He's got the plus speed. This is also something that's common. These are just athletes, like speed. All these guys have 55, 60, 65 grade speed grades, depending on the outlet you look at. I like that. I think Brad Seelig also said, we're going to play him at third base as well. So they're going to keep him in the infield. They're going to keep him in the outfield as well. He can play all three outfield spots. You mentioned that the 80% contact rate, that was, I think it was Joe Doyle on his write-up, said, it's 80% contact rate and big-time exit velo numbers. And he actually said that Horvath's strength was his approach at the plate. He struggles against higher velo, apparently, but still he's making a lot of contact. He doesn't chase. You can't teach his athleticism. You can't teach the raw power that he brings, but he's got the foundations of a big-time hitter, and you can fix that ability to, pick up spin or handle higher velo, turn that high contact rate into quality contact. Just look at Coby Mayo. John Muley, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know John Muley had a great piece of the banner the other day talking about Mayo's development and Mayo's numbers against breaking balls last year and how much they've improved. We know Judd Fabian's put in work in that area, and these are guys had swing and miss concerns on those types of pitches. The Orioles have proven they can fix these guys. And so if there is a concern, if one of your only concerns about a hitter, like it is with Bradfield and Horvath, is maybe some swing and miss or some hit tool questions, I'm fine with that. Bring them into the organization and let the player development staff get to work. I kind of instantly thought the John Rhodes comp makes a ton of sense. I also thought just in terms of I also got Max Wagner vibes just because second round pick, also, maybe a little bit underwhelming second round pick at first glance. It's going to take some time maybe to warm up to him. And I feel like, 2 months into next season, we could be sitting here all right, kind of who is he exactly? I get kind of those vibes as well, but that's just because the Orioles are maybe playing him everywhere. But I think in the meantime, he's going to be a guy that keeps you interested because he's going to hit a lot of home runs. He's going to hit loud home runs. He's going to steal a lot of bases. Get him in Roberto Mercado's team. This guy's hitting 15 home runs and stealing 30 bases. And even Joe Doyle said with Horvath, he's a wild card. So let's see what this. He's got all the building blocks there, and now we just got to see the Orioles kind of put these blocks together. John Rhodes is really a perfect comp, I think, is you're trying to compare him to guys who are already in the system.
Yeah, all these position players that they drafted the first 2 days are just absolutely electric. They're going to be so fun to watch live. Loud tools, power, speed, athleticism. Good stuff.
Yeah, the quote I mentioned earlier from Horvath came from Twins Daily, and if you're wondering why Twins Daily was writing about Horvath, that's because Horvath is from Minnesota. In fact, he went to high school in Minnesota up until his senior year when he played down at IMG Academy. So there's another parallel somewhat with Max Wagner. Wagner coming from a cold weather state in Wisconsin. Horvath did go down to IMG for his senior year, but both guys are from cold weather states, and I think there are some parallels where kind of fast risers up close to the draft might not have necessarily been, big names in the second round, but interesting set of tools and maybe a little raw coming into the system, but you can see where the Orioles player development model can improve them.
And I warned you all. I did the mock draft episode. I had Horvath in there. So just saying. Brad Seelig saw my mock draft and was like, I like it. So I'll take the credit, Brad, for that pick.
Yeah, I was wondering why the name was familiar when I heard it called.
We go now to a right-handed pitcher the Orioles rounded out night one of the draft with, and that is Jackson Ballmeister. You've heard us use the term hoppy fastball a lot on this show. Ballmeister fits those characteristics. A tall right-hander with a fastball that can rise up in the strike zone. Reports had it topping out in the high 90s this spring. While there are some concerns from national reports that Ballmeister's control could limit him to the bullpen, we have seen the Orioles take chances on guys like this in recent drafts, albeit in lower rounds. None of them quite have the ceiling that Ballmeister might have, but some question marks coming into the system. And one shout out to John Mioli again. I thought he hit the nail on the head in the banner this morning, saying that Ballmeister, you could see him this time a year from now throwing a splitter and a sweeper, or a cutter and a sweeper, I think it was, at Aberdeen. And that's probably the kind of development path you could see for him.
When the Orioles were making this pick, this was another scenario where it was like, there were guys like Jack Hurley was sitting there, the outfielder from Tech. Is it Chayce Brohafen from Arkansas? You even had Seth Keener out of Wake Forest. Those are some other guys that I was like at the top of my preference list. I'm like, they're all there again. And they go Ballmeister, and there was like a lot of excitement on social media as soon as this pick was made. And it doesn't really take long to see why. Like, he's 6'4", 226 pounds, big extension. So that's going to help the stuff play up. You look at early on, it was mostly a bullpen arm at Florida State, and then converted to a starter last year. And he had control issues early on in his career. Worked on that, went to the Cape Cod League after his freshman year and saw the walk rate drop from 6.5 walks per 9 innings. Improved on that in the Cape. Carried that over to his sophomore year at Florida State, where the walks dropped to 3.78 per 9 innings, and he's striking out like more than 12 guys per 9. So I think Brad Ciolek already mentioned as well, I like the curveball a lot in some of the highlight videos I saw. And then Brad said, we're going to add some velo to that, make that pitch even better. I think the fastball, again, just like all these pitchers, most of these pitchers we're going to talk about, it's got good velo. So I think he's also a draft eligible sophomore too. So like this isn't like an underslot pick. I think this guy's going to take some money. I think it was $1.24 million was his slot value. He might take a little bit more. I don't see many. I know not very many guys on day one or day two end up not signing, but he's only a draft eligible sophomore, so he does have a little bit of leverage there. But, he's also a very young, kind of inexperienced in a way pitcher. There's not a lot of mileage on that arm, so there's a ton of projection here with Ballmeister that makes this pick even more exciting and intriguing.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about hoppy fastballs about 7 times tonight. This was my favorite pick on the night of the first night, last night, at the moment, just because, this is like, obviously, first of all, the highest the Orioles have ever taken a pitcher under the Mike Elias regime. But this, you mentioned the projection, but it seems like his stuff is already pretty nasty. Mason McRae on Twitter tweeted out his stuff plus numbers, and overall he sits at a 137. The 4-seam is a 144, slider 128, curve 120, changeup 113. So 4 well above average stuff plus numbers on his pitches. And the Orioles have shown that they're pretty comfortable taking guys with not the best control and working on that and improving it, whether he ends up in the bullpen or they can get him into a starting pitcher long term. Then, this stuff is so electric. I'm very confident they're going to be able to do something with this guy. We're excited about Trace Bright, and this guy's just like a much better version, the rich man's version of Trace Bright, basically, to me.
Yeah, and I think kind of like with Bright last year, where we were talking about maybe there is more that meets the eye than what his college ERA suggests. I think that's absolutely the case with Ballmeister. And to go back to the points that John Mioli made in the banner this morning, where he said he was going to expect him to be throwing a cutter and splitter by next year in Aberdeen if history holds. That definitely feels like it would be a reasonable development path for him, because you've already got that fastball curveball combination, possibility of developing a changeup to go with that. If you could really broaden his repertoire, that could make him, I think, a legitimate starting pitching prospect as long as the command is there.
Yeah, I think you've got 7 pitchers they drafted. Ballmeister, I think, has the highest ceiling here, possibly the highest ceiling. But all 7 of these guys honestly have traits and things that stick out to you and make you say, like, they could be starting pitching prospects. And the fact that the Orioles are clearly not afraid to turn any relief prospect into a potential starting pitching prospect. I just think that, honestly, at this point, we saw kind of like a shift in this draft to where the Orioles now feel pretty confident in their development of pitchers and getting the most out of these guys. And so I just think that you see 7 of these pitchers go in their first round. You see them go early with Baumeister. It's like all these guys throwing 98, 99 miles an hour. That's the one big thing with all these guys' fastballs. I don't think anyone in this bunch, the lowest fastball might be like tops out at like 97 miles per hour. So it's no more of these like 92, 93 miles an hour guys with good stuff. It's guys that have decent secondary stuff, but fastballs that are going to carry them out, at least in the beginning, at 98, 99 miles an hour. So I just think we're seeing the shift now where this farm system is stacked with infield talent, and we're going to be seeing a lot more pitching as over the next couple of years in drafts, I think.
And we'll talk now about day 2 of the draft that covered rounds 3 through 10. And just to run down very quickly the guys that the Orioles selected. In the 3rd round, the Orioles had 2 picks. The first selection was Kiefer Ward, a right-handed pitcher out of Washington, who I think we're going to talk about a lot here. They followed that up later in the 3rd round with Tavion Josenberger, an outfielder who also does have a little bit of infield versatility, much like Horvath, and an interesting skill set that he brings with him into the farm system. Levi Wells was the Orioles' 4th rounder, a right-handed pitcher out of Texas State. He was followed by the bat that could be the sleeper in this draft class, and that was Jake Cunningham, an outfielder out of UNC Charlotte. Jacob Cravey, a right-handed pitcher out of Stanford University, was chosen in the 6th round, followed by Teddy Sharkey out of Coastal Carolina in the 7th round. Braxton Bragg, a right-handed pitcher, in the 8th round out of Dallas Baptist University. Zach Fruit, another right-handed pitcher, was chosen out of Troy University in the 9th round. And then Matthew Etzel, an outfielder out of Southern Miss. The Orioles really did love the Sun Belt Conference in day 2, was chosen in the 10th round. So, Bob, I'll start with you here. What names in the day 2 class stand out to you?
I legitimately like all of these guys. But to me, it's Jake Cunningham has the asterisk on it as like the guy who I feel like could be a top 15, top 20 guy next year around this time. Just, again, electric athlete. I think Brad Seelig said he showed plus raw power at their workout, 111 exit velocities, and, he's got the speed, the defense. I think he could stick in center. I think the reason his stock was down a little bit was because he was come back too soon from an injury or something happened this year where, he could easily go back and increase his draft stock for next year. So I think he's going to be an overslot guy if they're going to get him, and seems like they love him. So I would imagine that they will get him and they will pay him whatever it takes. So yeah, very excited about this guy. And yeah, I'll say my favorite pitcher from this group would probably be Teddy Sharkey. First of all, amazing name. My cousin also went to Coastal Carolina, so there's a connection there. And yeah, it just seems like his stuff is incredibly good. I know he was a relief pitcher for them, but he's got enough of an arsenal. I wouldn't be shocked if this is like an Alex Pham situation where he's a little bit, doesn't have quite the build that you would want to see from a starting pitcher, but he's got that 3-4 pitch mix that is really good, and maybe they play around with that and make him into a potential starting pitcher. So I'd say those were my 2 favorites today.
Yeah, the Jake Cunningham pick, I squealed a little bit when I saw that pick come across on the screen. I'm very intrigued by just all of his tools. I love Brad Steelig's quote, calling him a tool shed. He's got like 70-grade speed, which you don't expect. This guy can hit bombs, and the numbers with a lot of these guys, like, don't look at their college numbers. There's some of the pitchers like ERAs or, talking about Baumeister, like he had an ERA over 5, I think. I don't care. Who cares? Like the traits, it's look at their stuff. And Cunningham's tools are off the charts. I think the broadcast even described his measurables as off the charts. And I think it was Jim Callis who said, you don't see college athletes like this guy. And I think they're 100% right. Just last year when he was healthy, he had 16 home runs and 16 stolen bases. This year, the numbers were kind of, wonky because he had the ankle injury like Bob mentioned, but huge exit velos. I like getting the info there about the 111 exit velos coming in a workout at Camden Yards with a wood bat. I mean, we heard some of those big comments coming from a guy like Creed Willems with the wood bat workout pre-draft at Camden Yards, and look what he's turned into. I think there is risk there with him. He's not a slam dunk by any means, but the potential is just so much fun to dream on because of the speed, because of the power. He's a center field defender. I think he could probably stick there. But he's got the raw power, speed, super athletic, doesn't chase as well. Now you just get to work on the hit tool. I love that pick. Even the 10th guy, the guy in the 10th round, just you mentioned the Sun Belt. I love as JMU new members of the Sun Belt. I'm learning about the Sun Belt Conference and SEC, whatever. Matthew Etzel is interesting. Another true center fielder from Southern Miss, only hit 7 home runs this season, but all the reports that I saw were talking about how I don't think he's really tapped into a lot of that raw power that he has. Again, another power speed combo guy, lefty, big time athlete, 88% contact rate plus bat to ball skills. Again, rarely chases. That's in every single one of these hitters. The scouting reports there. For the pitcher, I really like Levi Wells out of Texas State, the 4th round pick. Again, another Sun Belt guy. High strikeouts, low walks. He's got the delivery also that we've seen the Orioles love. That Kyle Bradish, Alex Pham, over the top, vertical arm slots. It looks like he throws a mid-90s fastball that can touch 97. Baseball America gives him 3 pitches that grade out at 55 or higher. And the changeup, I think, was his worst graded pitch, but Baseball America's report noted that he only used it 6% of the time. So he just hasn't used it. I think he was a big riser over the last couple of years, and then his stuff kind of took a step back this year, but he's shown the ability to have much higher quality stuff in the past. I think the Orioles are going to bring him in, use him as a starter, and this could be a guy that, again, like Baumeister, the ceiling is way higher than where he's at right now. So tons of projection here with him.
Yeah, there's a few names from day 2 that stood out to me, and I'll give a little bit of background on Cunningham because Bob touched on injury issues that he had. He had suffered an injury lifting weights, and that cost him the first couple of weeks of this season. And then when he was able to get back on the field, he was actually DHing initially. So right ankle injury while lifting weights, it cost him the first couple of weeks of this season, and then he DH'd for a month after coming back off the injured list. So not the best spring for Cunningham to showcase himself, but for the reasons that you both mentioned, loud tools make him a very intriguing player. I really think that Tavion Josenberger has the potential to be interesting. This feels like one of those late riser picks that the Orioles really like to make. He transferred to Arkansas this spring after a couple of seasons at Kansas and tapped into a little bit more power while continuing to do some of the things that he does well, which is provide versatility and good plate discipline and strike zone judgment. So it feels like it's a bat that maybe doesn't have a ton of power projection necessarily, but you add in the versatility with the strike zone judgment, and he could be a pretty interesting prospect. And for the pitchers, I really, really like Kiefer Lord, the first pick that the Orioles had in the 3rd round. There's a lot of good articles out there about how Lord basically turned himself into a pitcher. Over the pandemic shutdown in the spring, he was in high school, topping out in the low 80s, starts working out in the pandemic, all of a sudden gets his fastball up into a lot in the 90s, starts out of Division III school, then goes to Washington this year. And this is another case where you really should not be fooled by the high ERA. A couple of things to note were that he was rocked in his last 4 starts at Washington. Up until that point, his ERA had been riding in the low 3s. And the quote here, Brad Selig's take from him on him, and this is from Jacob Calvin Meyer in the Baltimore Sun. Selig notes that he threw his fastball over 70% of the time this year and adds, so a big focal point for us with him is going to continue to work on implementing his slider more often, but also let him use his curveball and changeup increasingly with every outing he's going to get with us. So this is someone who has to work on his secondaries. And much like Baumeister, it feels like the Orioles see a guy whose fastball they like. They think the mix of pitches is there just enough they can develop him and really refine him. And he's come a long way just in the last 3 years.
Yeah, I love this pick as well. Him and Zach Fruit. Was it Zach Fruit? Is that his first name? Yeah. These guys have huge arms, huge velocities right from the jump in the college season. And I think an interesting thing to note about the pitching development with the Orioles. Look, we've seen Alex Pham, Gene Pinto, these guys pop up and they've developed. Justin Armbruster. I feel like the one thing that has been missing is that elite velocity that they can work with. And they got a lot of guys in this draft so far already that they give them that and they can kind of work off of that. And I feel like that's where you get more of the high upside pitching prospects. Not that there's anything wrong with the Alex Phams of the world. They're obviously, we love them. They're doing great performance wise, but I feel like there's a lot more ceiling with these guys like Lord and Fruit and Ballmeister. So yeah, I absolutely love that pick as well.
And that's one thing I was thinking about as these pitchers started coming off the board. Like, look what the Orioles have been able to do with Armbruster was a smaller school guy. Now he's a top 30 prospect in the league's best farm system. Ryan Watson wasn't drafted, although that was 2020, so he probably would have been in that 6 to 10 range. He was the minor league pitcher of the year last year in this Orioles system. There were, 7 or 8 Orioles pitching prospects in the top 30, and other than DL Hall, none of them were drafted in the first round. And a lot of these guys, like Bob mentioned, don't have the extreme fastball velos. So now you're going to bring in a guy who throws 99 with little mileage on his arm. I'm stoked to see what they can pull out of these guys. But some of these other picks too, just like to shout them out. I like the 6th rounder, Jacob Cravey out of Samford. He's 6'6" and threw over 100 innings last year at Samford. I doubt we see him this year. Maybe a couple 1-inning stints down the FCL, maybe Delmarva, but he's just a 6'6" workhorse. He pitched against LSU this year too, early on in the year. Early on at LSU, struck out Dylan Cruz, Gavin Dugas, and Trey Morgan, like struck out all the guys. Only gave up 2 earned runs, so he held his own against the eventual national champs there. I like that pick. Sharkey, the numbers on him are absurd. I also love his emotion out there on the mound. You guys know I love that. He's going to strike you out, and he's going to make sure you know that he struck you out. But just the slider, 32% usage rate last year, had a 51% whiff rate, 48% whiff rate with his curveball, 74 strikeouts to just 18 walks in 49 innings. Just so much beautiful data out there on this kid. It seems like he's just, I believe one of his coaches called him a psychopath on Twitter. So I love that. Bring that to me. Braxton Bragg.
Dustin Knight doing backflips.
Yeah. I'm Braxton Bragg out of Dallas Baptist is a cool story that he was Cade Povich's roommate at Nebraska. Shout out to Cade Povich's dad for giving us that tidbit there. I do want to figure out the backstory about his name, though, for fellow history people out there who may know. I do want to know that story. But again, he's a ground ball sinker specialist. We know we like those guys in this organization as well. So maybe more of a relief prospect there, same as Zach Fruit. But again, these guys have starter traits as well, and you just don't know what the Orioles are going to do with these pitching prospects.
Yeah, reading up about Sharkey today, he feels like one of those guys that if the Orioles decided, all right, we're going to limit him to 1 inning, just turn him loose in the bullpen, that he can move quickly. He's got a hard fastball that he commands well. He repeats his delivery very well. But from the sounds of it, and again, quoting from the Jacob Calvin Myers piece over at the Baltimore Sun, Brad Seelig said ideally in Sharkey's situation, they would hopefully extend him and let him go a couple of innings. And he did add, now I'm not going to sit here and say that the idea would be to develop him long-term as a starting pitcher, but that is something that we'd like to strive for with Teddy. When I hear that, I think to myself, they would like to see if they could get him to be sort of in that Brian Baker mold right now, where there's a guy who's got a hard fastball that you can go to out of the bullpen for multiple innings of relief. So even if they try Sharkey as a starter and it doesn't work, if he shows that he can get through an order over 3 innings and be successful, that sets him up nicely to be a multi-inning reliever.
Yeah, it just seems like that's the way the game is going as far as elite relievers. You want guys that could potentially give you 2 or 3 if you need it. So, yeah, I like that a lot. Also want to say Matthew Etzel, he's got an awesome beard. And Tavian Josenberger, I think he might be the sleeper of the first 2 days. I feel like, they got a lot of these athletic outfielders, and I feel like he's a switch hitter. He can learn a lot from Cedric Mullins. Maybe he ditches the switch hitting at one point, but if you're Ben Dorst, Orioles status one on Twitter, you got to like this draft because he's a fan of the steals. You're going to see a lot of steals from these guys.
That actually segues me perfectly to the question I was about to ask the two of you. Big emphasis on speed with the hitters in this draft class. We know the Orioles right now at the major league level are stealing a ton of bases, and that's been part of their success. Do you think that this reflects maybe a broader organizational shift towards speed, or do you think that it's maybe just a case where there are some hitters whose profiles they like, but they also happen to be fast, and that's another bonus?
I think they've targeted this. I think Bradfield was probably the number 1 or number 2 guy on their board. And I don't know if they came out and said anything about that, where he was ranked on their board or not, but I imagine he was very high on the Orioles board because they wanted his skill set. I also think that, we've seen this play out at the major league level already, what impact this has. And now, we've got the big boppers that you drafted early. You've got them up to the major leagues. Now you get some on-base guys who can steal bases to fill in the rest of this lineup. I think it's all going to play out pretty beautifully. I forgot which point I was going to make here next, but yeah, I think we're seeing a shift here with the speedsters, who again have great swing decisions as well. It's not just speed. It's not just the Juan Pierre types, right? These are guys who have multiple skill sets, and they've already proven that they can get more out of guys as hit tools. And so if you've got guys now with speed in the organization, you're adding a whole another dimension to these players in the system. And just look at Aberdeen. I think that was the point I was going to make. Just look at Aberdeen. Again, I don't think it's just the field. I think maybe they're trying this out. All right, we're in high A. They went to Roberto Mercado at the beginning of the year and said, steal all the time. Get these guys moving. And I think we're going to see that more in the upper levels of the minor leagues even. And again, in a couple of years, it's going to translate into the major leagues. So I do think it's a whole big philosophical shift here.
Yeah, I do think it's that. I also think they just want to get awesome athletes, and feel like, the better the athlete, the better the clay that you can mold them with. And I feel like they have focused on defense a lot as well in this draft, and versatility. I mean, obviously, Horvath can play third base and outfield, but I feel like these guys can play all 3 outfield positions. They can just be moved around and played with, because I think with a talented farm system, a talented organization like the Orioles have, you're going to need guys to be able to do more than one thing, play more than one position to get them in the lineup. And yeah, I think also just we've seen what Mateo, Mullins, even just the first game of the season against Boston when we stole 5 or 6 bases, just see what that kind of can do. And we know that this organization is forward thinking. So if they're just thinking, hey, this is where the game's going, let's jump on it first. And that's what they're doing.
We'll go now to talking about some players who are in the Orioles farm system. And, of course, we're going to have more coverage of players that are drafted in this draft class, because we'll have presumably some day 3 picks that we'll want to talk about next week. And then, of course, when our top 50 update comes in August, it's going to include draft picks from this draft class. So that's going to be a lot of opportunities for us to discuss these guys in fuller detail. But for now, let's shift our focus over to players who are currently in the system and are moving up. Jackson Holliday, Coby, Mayo, and Chayce McDermott all earned promotions to the next level, with Mayo and McDermott going to AAA Norfolk and Holliday making the leap to AA Bowie. We'll start with Holliday in this discussion, because the 19-year-old went to high A and pretty much picked up right where he left off in Delmarva, batting .314 over 259 plate appearances with the Ironbirds, while posting a 162 WRC+, belting 5 homers and showing that elite pitch recognition and plate discipline that he had down in Delmarva, striking out 20.8% of the time while walking 19.3% of the time. So not surprising that Holliday gets to jump to Bowie. I think we all kind of knew coming into this season that was the end goal for him this year. But here we are in mid-July. He's going to get 2 solid months at a higher level. Nick, what are your thoughts on this promotion?
I mean, I think I said a couple weeks ago that I figured July 1 was going to be when he gets called up. If he was going to continue to play the way he did when he first got called up, that there's no way you're going to keep him in AA. And I know I've seen a lot of other, people kind of, fire back and say, well, why are we rushing him? We don't need to rush him. Look at AAA. Look at the Major League roster. Look at AAA. There's no need to rush him. He's still 19. I do get that, but you also want to challenge this kid. We know the organization loves to challenge their top prospects and be aggressive with them. And I think you've got a perfect opportunity here with Holliday. Honestly, I know I said a couple weeks ago July 1 was the target here, but I don't really want to call it a slump, but he just wasn't as electric as he had been the rest of the year for a couple of weeks there. But it had 1 week of really huge games for Holliday, and I was kind of a little bit shocked, but pleasantly surprised to see the Orioles go ahead and move him up. And one thing too, like I was trying to find his splits because he got promoted. I can't break down the splits. I was trying to look at what his numbers were like just at Aberdeen, and I can't seem to do that here on the fly on his player page. But yeah, I'm glad he's up in AA already. He gets the bump up. He's still 3 years younger than his competition or so at the high level, and the walk rate and strikeout rates were virtually the same as they were in low A. So really no change there. 162 WRC plus is still absurd at this level. We might see him struggle a little bit now that he's getting the bump up to AA. He is 19 years old at the AA level. I don't think we're going to see him hit like 175 over the next 3 weeks or something, but patience with him at this point. That's the only thing I would say now that he's getting bumped up pretty aggressively here.
To me, I feel like I've been able to identify why now is the time to promote him. We know Matt Blood. He wants to see these guys struggle when they're promoted. Obviously, Jackson Holliday hit the ground running in high A for a long time. And then I think we joked that Matt Blood was finally happy when Jackson Holliday started struggling a little bit. From May 24th to June 22nd, he batted .207 with a 637 OPS. Still had a 94 WRC plus because he walked more than 19% of the time. But he went through that rough patch and then bounced back from June 24th to July 6th and batted .381 with an OPS over 1,000 again, 185 WRC plus. So I feel like that was when they were like, okay, we saw what we wanted. He struggled, he adjusted, and he's killing it again. And now let's challenge him again, see if we can get him to struggle.
The other hitter going up in this round of promotions is Mayo, who just absolutely tore up his competition at AA Bowie, batting .307 with a 176 WRC plus, 17 home runs to go, with some of the best strikeout to walk numbers of his career. He struck out just under 25% of the time, yet walked just under 15% of the time, which is pretty good for a guy with that kind of power. Bob, it felt like this promotion had to be coming sooner rather than later because Mayo just seemed to be getting better as time went on. And he got to the point where you're sitting there wondering, is he going to get like another 2 weeks in AA and then his WRC plus is going to be like 220 with, and then he'll have 25 homers or something like that. But this is probably, I think statistically, probably the strongest case for a promotion right now in the Orioles farm system.
Oh yeah, it was. The only reason it hadn't happened yet, I feel like, is just because of the cluster of prospects that were already in Norfolk. And now that Jordan Westberg and Colton Cowser are up with the major league team, that created some space. And we saw Kjerstad first, then Prieto, now Mayo. I feel like we started calling for this promotion like 3 weeks to a month ago, and it's finally happened. And we talked about how, maybe we'll see Jackson Holliday struggle a little bit at the beginning when he gets to AA. I'm not expecting that from Coby Mayo. I feel like he's going to hit the ground running. I feel like he's extremely motivated. I think he's closer as far as prospect capital to Jackson Holliday than a lot of people think. I think this guy is a top 10, top 15 type of prospect in all of baseball. I think he's still being overlooked despite just absolutely getting better and better as the season goes on, just putting up ridiculous numbers. I couldn't be happier that he's in AAA. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if he was another guy that could get a cup of coffee in September. If he just continues to rake like he was in Bowie, a contending team is not going to pass up that opportunity towards the end of the year.
Yeah, just absurd numbers Mayo was putting up. The month of June, he played in 26 games. He hit 340 with an OPS of almost 1,200. He had 8 home runs that month and 20 walks to 29 strikeouts. Just a steadily improvement too from April up through June. 883 OPS to a 953 OPS to an 1178 OPS. And the month of July, he played in 8 games. He had 6 walks in those 8 games, 2 home runs, 1077 OPS. I do agree that it was kind of just that logjam there. And we said from the beginning, Jordan Westberg has got to be like the key Jenga piece here that's got to move first. And then you're going to see the rest of the tower fall down. And we're seeing that now. He's up in the major leagues. Prieto's up. There's still playing time. Mayo can move over to third base now. He's going to play third, probably first, DH as well. Kjerstad continue to play first base, right field, DH as well. I Honestly, I was trying to find this tweet here from a great follow on Twitter. O's Observations on Twitter had a couple polls out about who right now would put up better offensive numbers in the major leagues. I was trying to see who he put with Mayo.
Was it Mountcastle?
It's probably Mountcastle, yeah. And that's a really good question. Right now, would Mayo, who right now would put up better offensive numbers in the big leagues, Coby Mayo or Ryan Mountcastle? And Coby Mayo was won the vote at 57.8%. Honestly, I fully believe that. I would say if you put Coby Mayo in the major leagues right now, it might take a couple of weeks, but the adjustments, again, I still don't have the article pulled up, but John Mueller's article on Mayo's adjustments that he's made this year in his development, the numbers are astronomical. The production that he's putting up on breaking pitches, sending the ball the other way, he's becoming a much more complete hitter. It's clicking. There's that conversation that him and Anthony Villa had, and they're working on things, and he's finally starting to do it in games, and it's all clicking for him, and he has not turned back. I do agree that he's still getting slept on nationally. I mean, I'm moving up to number 2 in my rankings, and I don't think I fully agree with Bob. I don't think the gap between Holliday and Mayo is that wide.
Here's something I find fascinating about Mayo. If you look at his month-over-month splits, I'll run off his OPS totals, and you could really pick any stat in this grouping and see the same trend. But 883 OPS in the month of April, pretty solid. Then it jumped up to 953 in May, 1178 in June, and is at 1077 through 8 games in July. So he's truly getting better as the year has gone on.
Yeah, it's very much like, I feel like Gunnar Henderson last year. Just, you could just tell that it was clicking. Like Nick said, something clicks and the confidence is there. And then once that's there, good luck pitchers. Because, I mean, these guys are so talented. They hit the ball so hard. And when they're not swinging at bad pitches, it's over.
The key is how, and now at this point, how do the Orioles view this infield of the future playing out? I think now that he's in AAA, it's going to get a lot more real here pretty soon. Is Coby Mayo one of the untouchables? We know Jackson Holliday is. He's not going anywhere. But is Coby Mayo? Or everyone can be had for a price, obviously. And we know that price on Coby Mayo is going to be astronomical. But are the Orioles going to be willing to put him in a deal, be the headliner of a package, maybe at the deadline or maybe sometime this offseason? I don't know if the massive trade comes at this deadline. I think that's more of an offseason type thing. But I am very curious now that he's in AAA and he's playing as well as he is and he's getting more national attention. He's going to be a top 20 prospect nationally, I think, by this time next year. If he moves up to AAA, now that he's in AAA, if he's putting up good numbers, they're going to bump him up on national list. What's his future? It's going to be really interesting to see. And I like Vivek's comment there. I'd hate the job of who to keep and who to trade. Yeah, I don't envy this front office at all. But again, it's a fantastic problem to have because, all right, you decide to keep Coby Mayo. You've got Joey Ortiz, Connor Norby, 10 other pieces in this organization who are top 100 or just outside top 100 national lists that you can move. So,
yeah. If I'm Mike Elias, there's a bunch of guys that I don't want to trade just because I like them so much. Heston Kjerstad, Samuel Basayo, even who am I not thinking of right now? Joey Ortiz. But to me, Coby Mayo, Jackson Holliday, you're going to have to overpay big time to get those guys just for their age and what they're doing and their talent level. No, I wouldn't be surprised if this is when you start to see Mayo out in the outfield a little bit more, with the first baseman a little bit more. Now he's in AAA. He's right there. That bat is right there for a team that is contending for a division in the stacked AL East. So if he's continuing to rake in AAA, you're going to start seeing him moving around because they want that option to bring him up if they need him, and they might. Depends on the trade deadline. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. But yeah, it's super exciting once these guys that are so good, so young, get up to AAA. You're one phone call away. And I mean, obviously, we know it wouldn't happen until end of August, early September, just because of Rookie of the Year concerns and stuff like that. But yeah, it's very exciting.
The first game they put him in the outfield in Norfolk, I'm losing it because I know as soon as they put him in the outfield, that's going to tell you one thing. We know this organization by now. That's going to tell you that they're thinking about it, that he is firmly an option to be called up if this team makes the playoffs. So, yeah, I I'm mad we got like a couple more days, off days. I want to see him in a Norfolk Tides uniform, and I want to see him hitting home runs over that picnic area down there at Harbor Park right now.
Absolutely. We'll cover Chayce McDermott now. McDermott making the jump from Bowie to Norfolk. Very good through 68 in the third innings with the Bay Sox as he struck out 88 batters, posted a 3.56 ERA. If there is one thing to quibble about with McDermott, it is the walks. He walked 44 batters in that span and posted a walk per 9 inning of 5.8, which was just a little bit above the total that he had last year pitching for 3 teams in 2 different organizations. He had 5.6 walk per 9 and 103 2/3 last year between the Astros and Orioles organizations. So far, that number at 5.8 through his first 68 in the third innings pitched this season. It is worth noting, though, that I just talked about the month-over-month splits with Coby Mayo. McDermott has a much different trend when it comes to walk numbers. 9 walks in 16 in the third innings in April. And then in May, his workload gets ramped up a little bit. 27 in the third innings pitched over 6 starts. Walks 22 batters in that span. The total dropped down to 9 and 20 2/3 over 5 starts in June. He had one start in July before the promotion where he walked 4 batters. So McDermott does have, I would say it's starts or maybe clusters of starts where the command does get away from him. But I think that when you watch him, even on days where his command is not at its best, it's clear that his fastball and curveball are elite pitches. And I think that it's probably time to test that against more advanced competition.
Yeah. When DL Hall finally returns from his pilgrimage down to Sarasota to get that velocity back, they got to get a pose with them pointing at each other, Spider-Man meme, because the right-handed version, left-handed version. But it's still exciting because just the potential is insane with him, his stuff. And I feel like, yeah, maybe you could justify keeping him down in AA a little bit more. But I feel like even his last start, I feel like he was doing great. And then didn't he like walk a bunch of guys late in the 5th inning of his outing? But I don't know. I just think the AAA rotation has not been the most exciting outside of Grayson Rodriguez. Drew Rom struggled a little bit. Guys have been up and down, like Bruce Zimmerman. So it'll be fun to have a guy in AAA, and I'm sure Cade Povich will not be too far behind him in the next few weeks to months. It'll be exciting. You want to get the walks down, but I just want to see how his stuff plays against those 4A or even just prospects at AAA. I just want to see how that plays contact-wise. Is it going to be soft contact like it was in AA? Can he really just put the ball over the plate, give them a chance to hit it, and they'll roll it over, or they will just miss, foul it off? So I think it'll be a good test. And I do like Vivek's question, but I want to hear what Nick has to say first.
I honestly think it will play against those AAA hitters and those quad A guys, that tougher competition, because when he throws strikes, again, John Melly pointed it out as well, and you can see some of these numbers if you're just looking at his Fangraphs page. When he throws strikes, he is the top performing pitching prospect in this organization. I think hands down, no questions asked. I mean, he's not allowing home runs. Last year in Bowie, he allowed 2.36 home runs per 9 innings. That's down to 0.79. I know he's walking a lot of guys, but at the same time, he's not giving up home runs. He's got that ERA cut in half pretty much compared to last year. Strikeouts are pretty much maintaining the same. He's just got, and I know, I hate to say it because I found myself, it's the same conversation we had as DL Hall. Just throw strikes. I know we're getting there with McDermott, and I hate saying it. I'm trying to stop myself, but God, like the production that McDermott, we didn't see this type of production, I think, from DL Hall when he threw strikes. McDermott is getting unbelievable numbers. Guys just cannot barrel that stuff that he has. We'll see. I think that this organization strongly believes that to move him up, because like you said, they could have just kept him in AA, but I think they felt like the stuff is just too good. The results when he's on are just too good. We can't ignore it. Let's get him up to AAA. And honestly, like feast or famine. Either you're going to keep walking guys and it's not going to work out, or you're going to start throwing strikes and you're really going to start to take off.
We got a good question here from Vivek about McDermott. Do you guys think McDermott may get some shorter stints for bullpen purposes for the major league team?
I mean, even if the control isn't super improved when you get to AAA, again, it's not as big of a concern if you're only out there throwing for 1 inning. And he can throw in the upper 90s. He's got that explosive fastball. His slider it doesn't matter how bad of quality camera you're looking at on MLB TV, you can see the movement on this slider. I mean, it's ridiculous the movement this guy has on pitches. He can be a weapon in the major leagues by the end of the year if you need him to be. And, if you only need him out there to go against 2 or 3 batters, he could be effective.
Yeah, I feel like I talked about the possibility of using Cade Povich in that capability in that spot a few months ago. And yeah, Chayce McDermott, same thing. Stuff is so good, and major leaguers, they're not going to have a lot of tape on him. It's some really good stuff, even if it's like, all right, if he walks 2 batters, then you got to hook him. But just, yeah, that would be Francisco Rodriguez-esque, K-Rod, Chase Rod. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, he could be something like that potentially. I wouldn't count on it. I would imagine they just continue to develop him as is. But if the need arises and they're like, hey, we have him right here, they could easily go to that.
Yeah, that's kind of my expectation too. They're going to kind of stick with their plan for him, and that's for him to continue starting because they do have other options down at Norfolk that they could look at. Darwinson Hernandez still is not up in the major leagues. So you've got a couple of guys who you could turn to. But yeah, I could absolutely see, in August where the Orioles feel like, okay, we need another reliever or 2 for the month of September. McDermott is pitching well at AAA, but let's start reducing his outings a little bit and get him ready for a bullpen role. I absolutely wouldn't rule that out. And just to touch on that point, thinking long term, there's not a lot. I don't think we're going to learn the definitive answer in AAA because you almost never do about whether or not a guy is going to be a starter at the major league level or a reliever. But the fact that McDermott got through AA is an encouraging sign for me in terms of his prospects as a starting pitcher. It's not an end-all, be-all, but it's an encouraging sign.
Yeah, I was going to say, too, with McDermott, I was looking real quick. He's not Rule 5 eligible, so I was wondering if maybe that could speed up things a little bit more as well, but he's not. And you're going to have a lot of other decisions to make, I think, on this roster come this offseason as far as the Rule 5 goes. And yeah, I like that. Darwinson Hernandez, Easton Lucas could be an option. You give him a chance as well, see if he could do it and whether or not you want to protect him this offseason. But it is an interesting question. Yeah, Wanderson Charles, although he's last couple of outings not so great, but he's learning. But yeah, I don't know. Interesting question. There's something to think about here. We have no games to watch.
We'll go now into our final segment of the night where we shout out players outside of our top 30 for things that they've done recently, whether that has been a good game, a good week, or just something interesting in their stat line that we want to point out. So, Bob, you haven't done this in a couple of weeks. We'll let you start.
Yeah, a little rusty, but let's see what we got. For my hitter, I picked Thomas Sosa, who got a late start to the FCL season. I don't know why. Maybe he was banged up or whatever, but this was a guy we were excited about after last year's international signing period with some power potential, and he did not exactly light up the stats in the DSL. He batted .201 with a .596 OPS, 68 WRC plus, walked 8.8% of the time, struck out over 26% of the time. But in his first 48 plate appearances in the FCL since he came in, he's performed pretty darn well. I'd say he's batting .256 with an .857 OPS, 124 WRC plus, walking double what he did last year, 16.7%, striking out only 20.8%. ISO has doubled as well. It's still only 12 games so far, but just like what you see early on from him, making adjustments and developing. And for my pitcher, I got to go with Jared Beck, the 7-footer out of last year's draft. I mean, he's just getting better and better as the season goes on. On the season, he's got his ERA down to 3.86, which it was in the 5s not too long ago. Striking out 12 batters per 9, walking 5, but you expect a guy that tall to struggle with command, so that'll probably be the last thing that comes. But over his last, 5 starts since June 14th, he has a 0.90 ERA, over 20 innings with 25 strikeouts and 12 walks. No home runs allowed in that span. So shout out to him. He's turning himself into someone to keep an eye on for sure.
I like them. I bought a Thomas Sosa autographed baseball card after the Orioles signed him, so I need him to do good. I was wondering if you've seen any videos on Thomas Sosa either recently, but anyway, my hitter is Silas Arduin. Down in Aberdeen, he played in 4 games last week, had 6 hits. 3 of them were home runs. He had 7 walks and just 1 strikeout. Just crazy numbers. Aberdeen just had their own home run derby down in Greensboro last week. I don't know if that's a home run friendly park or not, or just Greensboro just doesn't have the pitching. I'm honestly not. I don't even know if they've had a broadcast up until this year. So I don't really know much about their ballpark, but Aberdeen seems to love hitting there. He had a multi-home run game and then turned around and his first at bat, I believe, of the next game hit his 3rd home run. We already know like he brings really impressive defense to the table. He's been a top 30 prospect before on some national lists. So if he can just show a little bit of offensive production, I think he becomes a super attractive prospect in the system. And then my pitcher, I'm going Moises Chayce. I feel like I get the daily recap duties for every Moises Chayce start, and they're all the same. He starts out, it's the first inning, he looks great, and then the walks pile up, and he falls apart. He seems to fall apart, but he's picking up the win. He gives up 4 runs or 5 runs, 5 or 6 walks, but he's getting like 6 or 7 strikeouts every single outing. But last week, he went 4 innings, gave up no runs, had just 2 walks, and 7 strikeouts. And on the year, he has 78 strikeouts in 52 innings. And opponents are hitting just 202 against him, but he does have that 1.65 whip. The walks are definitely holding him back. Again, I'm just going to say it again. Just stop walking, guys. Just throw strikes, limit the walks, and we could see him in Aberdeen later this year. He just turned 20, so still a young guy. I'm still holding out hope for Moises Chayce to take off at some point in the next couple of weeks.
My picks this week, starting with the hitter Maxwell Costas. Nick mentioned that Aberdeen sitters really loved hitting in Greensboro's ballpark, and Costas was no exception. On Thursday, he contributed 3 for 4 performance with 2 home runs and 4 RBI. He has hit 3 home runs already in the month of July this season. And overall this season, 38 games, 134 plate appearances, has an 897 OPS to go with 7 homers. I would love to see the batted ball data on Costas because it feels like when he squares up on a baseball, he squares it up and hits it really hard. That's something that's been noticeable with him since he came into the organization last year, and that has helped him so far be successful, at least from a power production perspective, during his time with Aberdeen. Worth noting, too, he's posted a .388 on-base percentage along the way. Pitching-wise, I'm going to shout out Houston Roth, who in his first outing back from a short IL stint on Saturday delivered 2 no-hit innings of relief, coming in behind Cade Povich, who was excellent in a win against the Richmond Flying Squirrels. Roth came in, delivered 2 no-hit innings out of the bullpen with 4 strikeouts and 1 walk. Roth does have an ERA of 5.62 on the year, but has struck out 53 batters in 49 2/3 innings pitched. Hopefully now that he's back from the IL after a short break, he's able to string together some good outings for Bowie. That does it for this week's show. Bob, Nick, and I will be back next Monday to break down the latest in the Orioles, including perhaps some Major League and minor league news, as well as a look at any day 3 selections that we find interesting. In the meantime, check us out on Twitter at PSL and The Verge, as well as Facebook and Instagram. Bob, you have something you want to add before we sign off?
I was just going to say we'll have a nice guest. Joe Doyle will be joining us to talk about the draft as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You do not want to miss that. Joe Doyle will be happy to have him on. So we all have that to look forward to next Monday. In the meantime, check out BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com for all the latest coverage on the Orioles, Ravens, Terps, and more. And then if you have not signed up yet, become a member of our Patreon community. For as little as $3 a month, you'll have access to our WhatsApp channel, get the shout out at the start of the show. And then at our $5 and $10 levels, you will have access to our exclusive bonus daily coverage, as well as monthly top prospect list updates. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to On the Verge.
Paid actor portrayal.
I didn't see it coming. Life can be so unpredictable. After losing my dad, it made me think about my family if something were to happen to me. The mortgage, car payments, and all the other bills. Even things like our annual summer vacation would be out of reach. I had heard about life insurance through Ethos and how easy it was to get coverage. They were right. I knew it was time to stop putting it off and get life insurance right now. I got on my computer and went to ethoslife.com. In just 10 minutes, I was covered. And boom, family protected. Thanks to Ethos, my family won't have to worry about the bills if the unpredictable happens to me.
Ethos, fast and easy online term life insurance. Up to $2 million in coverage with no medical exam. Some policies as low as $1 a day. Answer a few health questions and get your free quote at ethoslife.com/audio. That's ethoslife.com/audio.